So welcome everybody to the Earth Science Women's Network second Careers Outside of Academia webinar series. We're really excited for everyone to join us, and we've had a really good response to the event as well. So we're excited. So a quick bit of housekeeping and what to expect today. So we'll have a quick event overview for the next couple of minutes, followed by some introductions by our panelists. With a Q&A session. Thank you so much for all of your questions. We have themed them all and come up with some very broad questions to answer in this session. After that, we'll have a breakout session where you'll be able to meet our panelists. So each panelist will be in their own breakout room, and a moderator will also be available to assist the panelist, and you can float between rooms as you'd like to. So all aspects of this event, except for the breakouts, are being recorded for those who wanted to participate asynchronously. The event is fully closed captioned, so you can activate these by pressing the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. You can also hide the subtitles, and this will only hide it for you and not for everyone else. Save your questions for the breakouts, but you can also share your thoughts in the chat as the event progresses. If you have any tech issues, remember to send them to the questions at ESWN host via the chat. We also ask that you abide by ESWN's Code of Conduct. So there'll be a link dropped in the chat relatively shortly with the full version. So this is a new Code of Conduct where we sort of state that our vision is to be a trusted and respected organization that supports career development, mentorship, and networking across all of the geosciences. And we aspire to transform scientific culture and institutions to advance justice, equity, inclusivity, and community. So our core values that are reflected in our Code of Conduct are community, respect, equity, inclusivity, and mentorship. And we expect everyone who's in this space today to abide by the Code of Conduct, and if you don't, then we'll ask you to leave. So take a look at this on our website. So now, for those of you who aren't so familiar with the Earth Science Women's Network, ESWN is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing diversity across the geosciences, with an emphasis on creating and supporting a nurturing community, working for cultural change to eliminate barriers to a diverse scientific workforce, and empowering scientists through professional development. So we decided to host this particular event because there are loads of careers beyond academia. You don't just have to become a professor after you leave university, and your background can make such a difference and take you to lots of different places. So from industry all the way through to government. So now three of us organized this, and we will each introduce ourselves in turn. So hi, my name is Raymat. I'm the ESWN Member Events Co-Chair. I am currently on a career adventure within the UK Research Councils and a foraminifer geochemist by training. And I will pass over to Katie.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Boyd. Thanks for joining us today. I work at the University of Colorado at a NOAA Cooperative Institute called CERES, the Cooperative Institute for Research and Environmental Sciences. And I'm in the education and outreach group there, and I do manage a climate change education project and some research and evaluation on our other educational projects. So I'm based in the Boulder area, traditional lands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute, and use she, her pronouns. And I'm really excited about today, and I'll pass it to Alana.
Thanks, Katie and Raymat. My name is Alana Pollock. I am also an organizer of this event. I am at Colorado State University. I am a research scientist in the atmospheric science department, and I do air quality related research. I am also the coordinator for the Progress program, promoting geoscience research, education, and success. And it's a mentor program for undergraduate women who are interested in the earth and environmental sciences. But today I am part of ESWN's team to promote professional development, and we're going to host this webinar today. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to help our panelists introduce themselves. If we could go to the next slide, Raymat. So we're gonna do some really fast Ignite style lightning talks. And the panelists have put these together. They're about 9 to 12 slides. They go automatically every 15 seconds. And the panelists are gonna present these slides to us in a very fun, very stressful way for them. So we're going to be very appreciative and very thankful of these panelists to do these very fun introductions for us. So let's get this party started. Emily, you're going to go first. I'm going to cue your slides right now. And as soon as you see your first slide show up, game on.
Good afternoon, morning, everyone, evening, whatever time it is for you. My name is Emily Hogan. My title's just there. I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you all. So my journey started when I was 11 years old, when I first saw the movie Twister. If you haven't seen the movie Twister, I highly recommend you give it a watch. I've since learned it's completely scientifically inaccurate, but it did spark that start for me, that interest in weather. It's a great movie. I found an atmospheric sciences program at the University of Leeds in the UK, which gave me the opportunity to study weather abroad for a year in the United States. While I didn't see a twister, I do have a picture of the first time I saw freezing rain there on the right. Very pretty. I had so much fun on my year abroad, I decided to return to the States to get my PhD in climate change science in Champaign, Illinois. I graduated in 2018 and decided to get a dog. This is Ash. You have lots of pictures of Ash to look at. Ash caused me a lot of problems during my time in grad school. He bit a gardener at the apartment complex that I lived at and got me evicted. But he did also introduce me to a whole new bunch of people at the dog park we would go to. So it's him having fun at the dog park. One of the people at this dog park one day asked for my resume. We were just chatting and she got me a job at her company. And I always thought that making connections meant handing out papers or business cards at formal events, but it turns out you can make professional connections through your poorly behaved dog. Who knew? My current position is at Nutrien Ag Solutions, which is appropriate because I live in the middle of the corn and soybean belt. This area here produces about a third of the world's corn and soybeans. And if you drive in any direction, it's all you can see are these fields. My role with this company is effectively to build, maintain, and develop tools that can help ag industry professionals minimize the risk that is involved with growing food for a huge global population that is increasing. Mother Nature can decimate crops, and while extreme winds and tornadoes are exciting, we also have to think about other disastrous events like drought or floods. So how do we as scientists use our knowledge of the atmosphere to support these folks out in the field who are trying to grow food for us? A little bit more about me. I am big involved in community theatre. This year we are performing Shrek the Musical, which is going to be just sensational. I did eventually forgive Ash for getting me evicted, so he remains one of my best buddies. And I also spend a lot of time in my garden in my backyard, which is my favorite place to be. So very excited to be here. Ask me any questions you like. Thank you.
All right, that was awesome. Thank you, Emily. Super fun. Ruth, you are up next, and I am cueing your slides right now.
Yeah, so my name is Ruth Winden. I'm a careers consultant for researchers, and I actually fell into my career. I spotted a job I love the look of. It was social sciences and psychology together, and that's how I became a career consultant. I currently work at the University of Leeds. I look after 5,000 researchers, 3,500 PhDs and 1,500 postdocs, also academics. So our community of researchers really comes from all over the world. We are a global organization, and it's a real joy to help our PhDs or our postdocs really to think about their next career moves, wherever that will be. I think the biggest challenge for them is really to think outside of the building, think out of the box, and that's my role, to really help them embrace all these amazing opportunities that there are out there, even if they think, well, I'm not so sure about it. I want to encourage you to really look at LinkedIn. You have 830 million people on LinkedIn, professionals. Go to your university website, look at the alumni function, and then look, where have people 5-6 years above you gone? And if you want to leave academia and go into a new direction, you need to be prepared for this question. Why do you want to leave academia? You're all high flyers, you have a lot to offer, so people will challenge you. Do you come here for the right reasons? And you might wonder, how do you know all this? I used to run a global careers consultancy for 20 years. I worked globally with employers, with recruiters, with executives. So that's where I built up a lot of my networks and my knowledge. And now I bring this to the university. You might wonder what my accent is. I am German. I got a scholarship to Cambridge. I was very lucky, came to the UK, lived in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I am a real true European, and I don't believe in Brexit. So my motto is life is a beautiful adventure. I've always pushed myself to do things, to explore things. I'm pretty much not risk averse, and I want to encourage you, what is there to lose? Try things out, approach people you find interesting. In my spare time, I love urban environments. I'm really into urban photography, and I love working around big cities and taking photos and really, soaking up this really exciting, dynamic environment. And then at the same time, I'm also really into nature. So the most amazing experience in my life was doing a charity trek in the Grand Canyon 5 years ago. It was the adventure of a lifetime. And I just want to be back there. It's the most beautiful place. And yeah, say hello. I'm really active on social media. I'm on Twitter all the time for work and also on LinkedIn, so say hello. And I look forward to answering any questions you have about careers outside of academia.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That was awesome. Oh my gosh, these talks are just so good. Clara, you are up. Here we go.
Hola, everybody. I am Clara Rodríguez. I am a geoscientist and expert in seismic interpretation and also a technical manager at Petronas, Mexico, and the GeoLatinas co-founder and vice chair. So I will tell you a little bit how I got here. During my childhood, I was surrounded by inspirational women like my mom. She's a soil scientist, as well as my aunt, who was a teacher, and many other amazing women in my life. When I was only 15 years old, I moved from my hometown to Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, to study my first degree in geophysical engineering. So I moved there alone. You can see some photos during my school and also when I graduated. When I was only 19, I went as an exchange student to the United States. It was challenging to be away from my family for 1 year and also to communicate in a different language. I started working in industry in Schlumberger, Venezuela as a geophysicist when I was only 21 years old. So it was an amazing experience. However, I had to study a lot and prepare myself to be able to be respected and valued and become an instructor and consultant for many of our clients and several international companies that were in Venezuela during that time. So being in Schlumberger, I got married, and after 1 year, I decided that I wanted to pursue a master in petroleum geoscience at Imperial College of London. Fortunately, I was sponsored by Schlumberger and also got the support from my husband to move to a very different country, sorry. 3 years working after the master, and then I decided that I wanted to pursue a PhD in geology. I was already a mom of 2, and the last year of my PhD, I had my third baby, Audrey. The PhD was then a challenge, and I was ill and battled depression, also anxiety and panic attacks. However, I found the right balance, taking care of myself with a healthy diet and exercise, especially. After the PhD, Schlumberger sent me to the United States. I was the financial support of my family of 5. It was challenging because my boss didn't value my PhD, so I did my best to succeed and making him unhappy. I love my current job at Petronas. They do value my knowledge and experience, and they also support everything that I do in volunteering related to the GeoLatinas community and organization. As you can see, the only constant in my life has been change. 20 years in industry, 3 degrees, 3 daughters, and I have lived in 4 countries. Thank you so much for listening.
So good. Oh, these talks are so good. Thank you so much, Clara. Keiko, here we go.
Great. Was that up? Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Keiko, Toma, like a cake. If you find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, I usually put cake in my name, so you know how to pronounce it. I work as head of analytics here, based just outside of London, for our National Health Service in England. And I'll tell you a little bit about my father's from Okinawa. On the top, you'll see a picture. That's lovely Okinawa, but he got shipped off to mainland Japan during the war, and his land being used by a Japanese and then US base. And my mum was from upstate New York on Lake Ontario, where she was helping her friends avoid the draft. So social justice is a big part of who I am. And you'll see in high school that I got obsessed with genetics and fruit flies, working at MIT labs. And I went on to study and play with lots of fun scanning electron microscopes and biomedical sciences in Ohio. And during my undergrad degree, I got to spend a year in Tokyo and work outside of a laboratory working on issues around homelessness in Tokyo. And through this lovely professor, Dr. Naoki Suzuki, who's a dear friend of mine now, I got to work at the G8 Summit in Okinawa, working on different issues of deprivation and poverty in high-income countries. In my work, I was an international recruiting manager, so I got to recruit people from 50 countries to come work in the educational startup in Tokyo, which was wonderful. At the same time, I was working in primary healthcare in Malawi, and I still continue to do that almost 20 years later pro bono. I did my master's in public health in Uppsala, eating lots of cardamom buns and focusing on biostatistics and research methods for perinatal and maternal mortality. And now I work for the National Health Service here, trying to solve things like how quickly can you get an appointment with your family doctor, your GP, how quickly can you get an ambulance? Some people are waiting 8 hours for cardiovascular ambulance response. So we do things like looking at cold weather impact on cardiovascular admissions on a weekly basis. I do a lot of work to try and improve access and equity in healthcare around LGBTQI populations and homelessness health outcomes. So there's a lot of biomedical science that goes into very quick operational research on a daily basis. And I try to do yoga and travel and eat and sail to manage my own kind of stress and anxieties outside of work. So I look forward to meeting you all. Thank you.
So good. Thank you so much for those self-introductions. I want to say thank you so much for our panelists doing those talks. You just completely rock-starred it, and that was great. Thank you. Thank you so much again. We're going to pop right into our general Q&A session. For our participants, we just want to let you know that we took into account all the questions that you sent us in your registration forms. Thank you so much for that. You had a lot of questions, which is awesome. And we put together a sheet of all those questions, and we found some common themes among those questions, and we narrowed down all of your questions into 8 key themes. And so we're going to go through those 8 key questions and have our panelists answer those in this general session. And then there'll be an opportunity in the breakouts after the general session where you'll have an opportunity to ask more questions in the chat. So let's roll right into our first question. How do you go about finding relevant positions, and how do you know they will be a good fit? Which parts of industry are best suited to environmental sciences, and how do you decide which would be best suited or most interesting to you? What types of positions require a PhD versus a master's degree? And we have asked Clara to give us her impressions of this question.
Hola. Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to tell you that all journeys are different, and most of them are not linear or perfect. And whatever you're doing now and you will do in your future is going to be super key and important for the next step of your career. So you need to be patient. So regarding if it will be a good fit for you, I think you will never know, but you need to be patient and also have the confidence that it's going to work for you. So some of the tips that I think could work, could help, is first of all, you need to make sure or try to imagine yourself 10 years from now and ask yourself, what is really important to you, to your future and the future of your community or the planet in general, right? The second thing is research is key. So you need to find out and read about the companies, different companies. Most of the companies in industry, they publish reports online about their achievements or everything they're doing, accomplishments and everything related to environment. So it is important that you read a lot and also document, maybe in a table, the pros and cons from each one of the companies. The other thing is use the social network like LinkedIn to connect to people who work in these companies. And don't be afraid to ask them questions. Maybe you find some people you know. And networks like GeoLatinas, for example, where there are many, many women or ESWN that can answer, or maybe they work in those companies and can answer some doubts you have. The fourth thing that I have here is don't be afraid to apply to many of the options that you see. And also don't be afraid to get rejected, because that is going to happen. That is part of the process of being, getting stronger and learning. So that's what the tips based on my experience regarding, I am actually in the oil and gas industry. So for me, it is important that people in the oil and gas industry think about the future and the energy transition and how we're going to impact the planet. But it may be somebody that is actually working environmental geoscience can help regarding the actual fit or the better companies to work for.
Thank you so much for that response. It's great insight. Do any of our other panelists have anything quick to add about this question?
I just wanted to add, I want to encourage you to try and experience different career paths, different roles. So these days, a lot of organizations offer either work shadowing or work experience, internships. It doesn't have to be for months and months. Our researchers at Leeds, I encourage them to look for maybe a placement for a week or even a day, because you really want to understand what you do in a career. On paper, it might be, it might look fantastic, and then you experience, oh, maybe it's not for me. Or the other way around. And I often have postdocs or PhDs who do these practical experiences, and they absolutely shine. And interesting enough, they often come out with a job offer. That's not always the case, but it's a great way also to try things out and get in front of people who are exactly looking for people like you with your background. So that practical experience, I can't stress that enough.
Thanks so much, Ruth, for adding that. I think we should move on to our second question. Our second question is about transitions, career transitions. And the question is, how do you transition from academia to industry? How hard was it to leave? Is there still research involved? And if not, how do you manage feelings of loss for self-directed research? And we have Emily is going to give us her impressions for this question.
Yeah, so I can draw from my experience. For me, the draw of industry was mainly financial. I wasn't doing too well financially at the end of my PhD, and the promise of a bigger salary made it a lot easier for me to make that decision to move from academia to industry. I will say it very quickly became too busy to really miss that self-directed research part. Academia is a little slower paced than industry. You tend to go a little faster, lots of big projects. If you are like me and you join a science team, which is kind of a research and development field area where you do get to do research, one thing to get used to is it's not necessarily about what you think is interesting anymore or what would be cool to look at and research. When it comes to industry, it's all about what benefits the company, what brings money in for the company. With respect to my work, we spent a couple months looking at this really interesting project into how the weather affected different types of pests and disease in agriculture. And we wanted to turn it into a monitoring and alert system, but the overall direction of the company changed and we had to transition into rebuilding our system in Amazon Web Services. So it was kind of a loss, but you learn to switch your focus and it does help. You're getting paid to learn and develop new skills. I never thought I'd be doing anything in AWS. So that does help. So I would just say, if research is really important to you, look for a position in industry that does do research, but do remember that it isn't going to be very much in your control anymore. And you have to kind of balance whether that's something that you can live with or not.
Can I just add on to that? I think that's absolutely right, Emily. I think I've moved from private sector now into public sector. So working in the health service here in England is public sector. And I would encourage everyone who has that real love for research and thinking about something different to also really consider public sector. So in public sector, I mean, there's probably, I would say, so we have 1 million employees in England who work for the National Health Service. Of the people who are not doctors or medics or clinical, about 10% have PhDs and have a research background, which makes you very, very unique and special. So in my kind of work, people ask me how to do modeling and how to solve problems with research, and publication is well supported. And so I would say definitely consider public sector, because there's a lot more room. They're not only after the bottom line all the time. There's a lot more room to do research, and we work really closely with research networks and academicians and frontline in the health service. And it's a really sweet place to be, because you can do really rapid research and see operational impact in the next 3 weeks or in the next quarter or the next year. So I just encourage people to think about what's public sector in whatever country you are, because it's a nice mix as well of research plus quick impact in operations.
I think we have 1 more minute if anyone else wants to chime in, and then we'll move on to the next question. Okay, too late. We're moving on. Okay, so our next question is a big one. It's all about applications. So applying for jobs. What are the differences in applications? Should I apply with a CV or a resume? What content, skills, strengths should I highlight in my resume or CV, or should one do so? How do you handle feeling both overqualified, maybe you have a PhD, and how do you handle feeling underqualified in terms of experience if you don't have a PhD or much experience under your belt? How do you translate education to experience and vice versa? And should the application be tailored to each job? And how do you ensure your application gets noticed among so many applicants? And Ruth is going to be our wonderful person to answer this.
I will do my best. I could talk all day about all these questions. So and I want to share a few things that I see researchers often get wrong, so you can take a few tips away. So first of all, every application has to be targeted, whether in academia or going in industry or public sector. I mean, you need to really read the job description, really understand it. Ideally, pluck up the courage and contact the person who's the hiring manager. In these job descriptions, you will always see, for informal inquiries, please contact so-and-so. I know that might feel like a big thing and you need to prepare because it could be the beginning of your interview, but I think you need to reach out, because from that conversation, you really understand what someone is looking for. The job description is one thing, but often there are hidden things that they didn't put in. And then you're in a prime situation where you can really tailor that application and say, okay, this is what they want. And then you step back and look at, okay, how can I show my experience, the courses I've done, internships I've done, even, LinkedIn learning courses. So think of everything that you can bring that is relevant, but the big word is relevance. And you have a huge amount of information to obviously offer. And one thing that's really hard is if you go for a non-research post, then people like me come along and tell you, well, all those publications, unless it's a communications role, are not that important anymore, and you don't want to look too academic. And that is really painful, because all the time, all that mattered was publication record. And then I come along and say, well, if it's not relevant, then, we'll just compress it and give some ideas of what you can write. But, if it's not relevant, leave it out. And that's hard. A few tips. You need to write it in an active voice. For instance, in industry, we look for achievements. And I don't want to scare you off, because you have a lot of achievements, but you need to look at it slightly differently. So it might not be, your publication record. It might be the number of people you mentor or coach. Or it might be, you're all project managers when you're in research. What were the projects? How big are the projects? How much money did you get, or how much money did you manage? What committees do you sit on? That is a sign of leadership. You do so many wonderful things, but you have to step back, and ideally, I'd say, sit with someone who's not in academia and just talk through your experience, because it's really hard to step back and see everything from a different perspective. But you basically have to get into the shoes of the employer and think, okay, when I look at you, what can you transfer? And you can transfer a lot of things. but also watch out for, we might call it differently. So I know that a lot of researchers formally or informally supervise, but in industry we don't call it supervise. We might call it coaching or mentoring, or or guiding or advising. So be clear about the language and look at the job description. Read a lot about the companies, as Clara said, and understand what language do they use, and then use that language. So you show them, I'm one of you. And then I think the last thing, we could talk about this all day, but just one more tip is look at the language that they use and adapt the language and write in the active voice. In academia, we write in the passive voice, so to be objective. But here you're presenting yourself, what difference do you make? So, managed, drove, led, these are the kind of words that we want to use, not things that happen to you, even awards that didn't happen to you. You got them because you're so good. And then the last thing is, don't forget LinkedIn. I see a lot of researchers, they polish their CVs, their applications, and then they forget about their LinkedIn profiles. And if you go into industry, you are bound. People will check you out. They will check your LinkedIn profile and they check your CV. And if you have a fantastic CV and an underdeveloped LinkedIn profile, it's a real turn-off. So sadly, you have to do more. The expectations are higher, but I help researchers a lot get actually headhunted from LinkedIn. So, a good LinkedIn profile can mean people come to you and they want you and they approach you. And that is the nicest way to do it. And I'll stop now because I could talk about this all day.
It's quite a loaded question. Thank you so much for that, Ruth. We have another minute or two if any of the other panelists want to jump in with any impressions. I think also in particular, just that part about the question of translating the education and the experience too, and just sort of how can an early career versus a mid-career person apply for similar jobs, or should they not?
Does anyone want to come in? No? Okay, I'll give you my take on it. I think you have to really talk to people. In every organization, it works differently. I have some people who go into senior positions straight away, and I have other people with the same level of experience who are junior. Every organization has a different way of grading and approaching these things. And then what I see most of the time is that researchers are too hesitant. You are sought after. We have a skills shortage worldwide. We need intelligent, educated people like you who are independent. You can drive progress. You have so much to offer. And it often starts with that recognizing what you offer. And then how do you put that out? And I hope, go to your career centers, use the organization, get some help with it. I know it's not easy, but people do it all the time, and be realistic. Some people always shoot too high. Talk to people. What level would you recommend I start at? Go to these people and talk, because it's so different from company to company. And I think that is, it's very specific to an employer, but please don't undervalue your PhDs. If you have a PhD, if you have a postdoc, if you have a master's, you have more experience than undergraduates, and you need to be clear, what difference do you bring? Because you're not an undergraduate or a graduate, you are now at a higher level. And some postdocs I work with, they have 10 years experience plus a PhD. Even a PhD, you have 3 to 4 years of solid experience of running a major project independently. That's what you need to put forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ruth. That was really great insight and great addition. Thank you. Our next question is about the dreaded cover letter. And Keiko, you're going to help us with this one. The question is, should you include a cover letter? Will it actually be read? What content should you include in that cover letter? And how much should it overlap with a CV or resume?
Okay, I'm going to have a try at this, and I look forward to everybody's support in this as well. I say absolutely send a cover letter or a supporting statement or whatever you want to call it for 2 reasons. Number one, you need to dig on that website of whatever organization, company, whatever body it is you're applying to, figure out what they're looking for. And I don't mean in the job description or the person specification. On their website, what does the organization care about? As Clara talked about earlier, look at the recent annual reports, quarterly reports, see what they're really focused on. Take their words and feed them back to them and put those in your cover letter. They want to say in a cover letter, I read 300 applications every week and I have 2 hours to read all 300. We are working in healthcare post-COVID. I have an unlimited budget at the moment to hire analysts. I get thousands of applications. I have very little time to read. I want to know, you know, what we're trying to do in the, you know, in the organization. You have some key skills. And so I would say, like, they tell you, every organization tells you what to put in your cover letter. They tell you, go find it. Look at the website and look at, you know, the job description, the job advert, whatever it is, and recent reports. Figure out what are their priorities, what are they trying to achieve, and definitely call. Email somebody who's a recruiting manager, yeah, and ask them for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And probably it'll end up being 45 minutes, but ask for 5 just to get in the door. Usually they keep talking because they get really excited and they want to know about you. Ask them, what are the top 3 things you are looking for in this person? Because you have to put that at the very top of your cover letter or make it repeated throughout. And I would say, why do you have a cover letter and a resume, or why do you have a cover letter and a CV? Because you can give in the cover letter, you can make it short and snappy with those keywords. And in your CV or your resume, you can give, you know, these star examples. What was the situation? What did you need to do with the task? What did you do to achieve it? What was the result? And you can outline those bits in your CV or your resume. Possibly you can give an amazing one in your cover letter, but I would say for certain include a cover letter, supporting statement, whatever it is. And I know now most things are online. You can't just send a cover letter, but there's usually a place where you can include supplementary information. Maybe not 100% of the time it's going to be read. But most people I work with and have worked with as a recruiting manager in Tokyo, as I said, I've traveled to 50 countries for recruiting. We were always reading cover letters. So I would say include them. Overlap between the cover letter and resume or CV. I would say try not to overlap too much, but if there's something you really want to highlight, I would say you could do it. I wouldn't try and repeat everything because it gets really boring and wastes people's time, is my personal opinion on it. Consolidating a CV into a succinct resume. I've heard many things about, so I grew up in the States, as you can tell from my accent, my education was there. I heard many things like your resume has to be 1 page. And then I heard at certain times, no, it can be 2 pages. I'm not too fussed about it, but whatever you for sure need to highlight needs to be on that first page, I would say, because that's what people are going to see first. And so I would focus on your key skills, key achievements at the top that really suit and relevant, as that word that Ruth said. Every application has to be different, unfortunately, unless they're very similar jobs and companies. So I would, at the top of your resume, put key achievements or key skills, you know, like I've used, you know, Python programming for this, or I've done, you know, cardiovascular monitoring with, you know, air quality, whatever, but put your key achievement and skills at the top that is relevant for that job. And then possibly your resume could be 2 pages. Am I going too long? Is that all right? I think that's all I had.
That is a perfect answer for that question. Thank you so much. I think you touched on all the points really, really well. I think we should move on to the next question though, which is about the dreaded interview. And Ruth, you're going to help us with this question. So here we go. What are the differences between academic and non-academic interview processes? How do you highlight transferable skills and strengths in an interview? And what advice do you have for interviews, especially with people you don't know, or maybe that you do know and know really well? And how do you prepare, and what questions do you ask? That's kind of a mouthful. Go for it.
Okay, let's go. I would like to start with the interview. You know, first of all, what different types of interviews? You know what? How much time do we have? How long is a piece of string? They differ so much. What I see in academia very often, it is in a relatively short 45 minutes, including a presentation. And you have a panel interview, and it's one interview, at least sort of at you know, sort of postdoctoral level and little, you know, lectureship. You know, maybe you have to give a practical presentation as a lecturer. When I look at more senior roles or look at industry, you know, very often there are 3 stages, even 4 stages. So if you go for an industry job, you need to be prepared that there's a screening interview at the beginning. It will be not even by, you know, your future hiring manager or line manager. It might be someone in HR, and they just have that role to, you know, they ask you very basic questions, and in terms of, they might make sure, you know, if it's relevant, you know, are you good on numerics? Are you good on the writing? Do you know the company values? You know, for some people, that's the easiest way to kick people out of the process. If you don't know what the company's values are, you are out, because they have too many applicants they need to screen. They will also ask about your salary expectations. And my top tip would be that you give them a range. You need to do your research beforehand, because if you're way too high, they would say, well, we can't afford that, you're out. If you're way too low, they will remember that. And then when you get a job and you negotiate, you know, you're a bit stuck. So always give them a range and say, well, you know, when I did my research, I saw that, you know, in the sector, you know, what for this position, what's normal is between X and Y, and, you know, sort of give them a small window, and then, then you can come back to it. That would be the first interview. You get through that, then it's a second interview. And some companies do assessment centers, and some companies will ask you to come in. But we see a real trend to still video interviews. I don't think that is going away. But the second interviews are more about the actual role and how you need to prepare is. And this brings in when you know or don't know people. If you know people, great. I hope you build a good reputation with them, because you know what they want, you know what they're interested in, you know their styles, you know, that's always an advantage, although it can feel a bit odd. Because they think, oh, they know me, you know, they know everything about me, so how do I present myself? But that can be also, you know, useful, because you can do your research. If you don't know them at all, my word, social media is our friend. You go on LinkedIn and you do look at their profiles, and you look at what have we got in common. You go on Twitter and you look at, you know, what are they tweeting about, you know, what is their style, what are they interested in, so that you feel a bit that you know something about them as well. Otherwise it can feel so unbalanced. They know so much about you and gives you confidence. And that second part of that interview is really about testing, you know, how suitable are you for the job. The great news is, if you get invited to interview, they will not waste their time. It means that in principle, you are qualified to do the job, otherwise they would not have invited you. Now is your time to shine and show them I'm as good in real life as I am on paper. And what you can really do is, you know, research a company as much as you can, and then look at the job description and look at what are the criteria, and then prepare those stories that Keiko also referred to. Keiko uses STAR, situation, task, action, result. I use CAR, challenge, action, result, but it's the same idea. And I like challenge more because researchers, you have challenges, you don't often get tasks to do, your self-starter. So what was the challenge? How did you overcome the challenge, and what was the end result? And then you link it in with, and what I've learned from this and what I would apply in your role or this position is X, or, you know, make that connection, or how I would use that experience, or I can see how I would use this in this role by doing X, Y, and Z. So always make that connection between your past experience and how you would use it, not for every question, but sort of sprinkle it in. And then prepare your own questions. I can't challenge you enough to do that. And don't make them, oh, how much training do you offer? How many holidays do I get? You know, you can find that all out online. It's not relevant. Show them through your questions that you're really committed. You know, what if you were to offer me this position, what key performance indicators would you have for me for the first 6 months? Because also that shows you speak business language if that's necessary, because one of the biggest worries people have is, will you be able to succeed in a non-academic environment, because it is faster paced, there's much more, you know, emphasis on the bottom line. It's a slightly different environment, and they want to test that out, you know. So, or, you know, if you were to offer me this position, you know, or what does the team look like, or, you know, what does a normal day look like, or, you know, anything that shows you're eager. And then if you get through that phase, then, you know, often there is a third interview, not always, but it could be a third interview. I see that a lot. And that is more about, you know, the CEO comes in or some senior people just to make sure, okay, you know, do you fit in? You know, do you fit in? Will you be joining us? And, you know, can we see you walk through the door next week? This culture fit is really important. Companies are more and more asking about, you know, that you fit culturally, because if you don't fit culturally, if you have completely different values, you will not be happy. So that's just one element of the interview. And think about, you know, all these questions, you can really ascertain. They will ask you. So if it's a project management role, you will be asked about, can you give us an example of when you project managed a complex challenge, a complex project? Tell us more. You know, you can prepare all this and bring some great stories in. Challenge, action, result. It's a super easy structure. It works a treat. You know, especially when you're nervous at interview, you will not forget challenge, action, result. Bring those stories in. Let me just see stories. Yeah. And then practice, practice, practice. Interview confidence does not come from theory or reading books. Practice, you know, get your friends together, the more you do, the better you get, you know. And if you have interview nerves, which we all have, a good interviewer will try and calm you down. They want to see your best, you know, they don't want to make you nervous. They want to see you at your best and experiment and see, you know, what helps, maybe going for a walk and the worst thing that can happen is you don't get it. And then you go for the next post. And no means new opportunity, you know. And I know it can be really upsetting when it was just your dream job and you're so gutted, but, you know, learn from it, move on. There will be another dream job coming along.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I personally really benefited from that last few sentences that you said of no means new opportunity. That's super good. Thank you so much for that. I think we should move on to our next question. I know that everybody probably has a bazillion more questions because we all think like scientists and one question leads to many, many more. But for the sake of time, we should move on to our next theme, which is about career stages. And Clara, we would love if you help us with this one. The question is, how can early career applicants compete with those who already have skills or experience in the private sector? And then on the flip side, how can a mid-career applicant compete with an early career applicant and avoid being overlooked as being maybe too qualified or too expensive?
You know what, I identify so much with these questions. I'm sure you saw when I was presenting my Ignite that my transitions were I had a lot of transitions during my career. You know, was in industry, then again academia, then industry again. And this impacted the way I was seen when I was coming back to industry. So it was difficult to answer these questions, but I can tell you that this is real. And for example, I was considered too academic after my PhD. However, I managed to demonstrate the company I worked for and the company I work right now, that being too academic can be a good thing for the industry and it can add value to the company. So regarding the actual, if it's difficult for an early career to compete with someone with multiple skills, software, for example. From my point of view, software is something you can learn in the company. So the company will always provide training, and most of the companies I know, based on my experience, they will provide training for software. If you are good as an early career and you have been prepared and coming from academia, this is another skill that you can do on the job training or an actual training where you're sent to. So make sure you kind of, during your interview, if you're asked if you know about software, make sure you tell that you're willing to learn and flexible to learn the software, since you already understand the concepts, right, or the workflows. So when you apply for a job, there are always roles, like in the industry have been to, and the companies have been, there are roles that are for early careers, and then you will see that, and they will give you the training, and there are positions that need the work experience. Like right now, we're looking for somebody who has experience. So we're rejecting early careers because they don't have the industry experience. That basically means that the job is not for you. So, I mean, it's just trying to understand the role before, you know, if you get rejected, you understand, you kind of are ready, you know, for the rejection. Regarding the other side of as a mid-career, so I'm 41 right now, so 40 plus, competing with early career. applicants. So this happened to me a lot because after my master, I was already considered more than an early career, 4 years of experience and a master, and I was always overqualified or too expensive compared to somebody without experience. I did my best, and that's what I would suggest, to highlight that those skills you have can add value to the needs of the company, and that you're willing also to teach others early careers or the colleagues you're working with, that you're willing to teach them what you know. So overqualified can be a good thing for a company, and that is something you can tell them, I do have experience on this, can help you, and I'm flexible and I can adapt to it. If you really want the job, and this is relatively lower level than what you are, highlight, like I said, that you're flexible and willing to learn new things or start from the beginning. And how you're going to convince them that you're able to adapt is giving them a very believable example. These star examples that people are, some of the experts has been talking about. Why? Right now, I have been involved in interviews. And when we ask a question and the person, we ask them to give us an example of a situation where they actually show that they can adapt and be flexible. And if you're not prepared for it, we're gonna realize you haven't really experienced that. So it is important that you think about really specific, real examples where you have a situation, how you solved or handled the situation, and what was the outcome of that situation. So right now, this is the way to go in interviews. It's not only about saying I'm amazing, but also about giving like examples, real examples that are believable, and that you can convince them they're able to adapt and other skills that they're asking for. So that's all that I have based on my experience. It is gonna be difficult, but it's not impossible. I don't know if some of my the panelists here would like to add something else.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much, Clara. And I think we have maybe 1 minute or 2 for others to chime in if they have anything to share.
Yeah, I think maybe it's also just thinking from an employer's perspective. If you're totally overqualified for something, the risk is that, after 3 or 6 months, you're bored and you move on. Recruitment is very expensive for employers, and they want to make sure that it's the right role for you. What I've always seen is, and I think that's always a great sign of an employer, I recently had a researcher who went into an organization outside of academia, and they said to her, she wanted to go for a job, and they felt she didn't quite have the right experience yet. So they said, we want to make, we really would love to employ you, but what about doing this job first? We'll train you up, and then when you're ready in 6 months, you go on to the next job. So often employers, we have a real shortage at the moment of good people. So, if they find someone who's really motivated and has a lot to offer, might maybe not be right for that position. They will either say, oh, but we know in the other team they're recruiting for this, or they might even try and find you an interim, and then you move forward. Just make sure that happens to you. You get it in writing, in form of email or some form of documentation that they said in 6 months' time we will help you move forward, because if the manager changes, you have no evidence. And I think everything, Clara, that you said is so perfect. It's about evidence. We can say everything and anything in an interview, but how do we prove what we're actually capable and what we know? And that's where these example stories really come in. So have a good think about those.
That's great advice. I think we should move on to our next question, which is about workplace culture. And Keiko is going to help us with this one. How do you find companies with good working environments in regards to the treatment of women, BIPOC and LGBTQ plus people? And how can you get a sense of the work culture? Are there interview questions or online resources to help determine this?
thank you. So first of all, I didn't know the term BIPOC, so I'll be very honest with you. So I Googled it before today's session. I think it's Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Is that right? Okay, thank you. So I think it's about inclusivity and equity, and is that right? Okay, and equality in the workplace. So first, there's quite a lot of surveys done by different industries. So I've seen lots of, I've seen a recent one. I was helping someone about, they were doing environmental consulting there and looking at, okay, so what do consulting companies and how do they compare for equality and, based on gender, sex, based on ethnicity, based on, sexual preferences and all sorts of kind of equity and equality questions. So I would say find those surveys. They are out there, and there are lots of companies that are dedicated to running those surveys across companies. In the public sector and government, they are mandatory to do and to publish. So they're there. I think the other thing that's helped me recently, so I had headhunters contacting me from Ernst & Young and from Deloitte. And if any of you work for them, I've learned they can be wonderful places to work. Of course, your team is the most important thing, right? So there's something about an organizational culture, but kind of going back to what Ruth put in the chat earlier, the people sitting next to you, who you have to deal with day in and day out, are really important. And so what I would say is, what I did is I went to my alumni network through my universities, and I found people who worked in those companies, and I said to those people, can you introduce me to people who work on these teams who are trying to recruit me in? And then it took like 2 or 3 steps, but I finally got there. And as I said to each of these, as I said earlier, I asked for 5 minutes and each of them gave me like an hour, and I said, I really have to go cook dinner for my family. But then you can ask real questions. I work in the NHS here in England. I was called Ching Chong by a very senior executive director on a national call, publicly televised. So these things do happen. But I'm not saying it's a horrible place to work. I'm still here. It's a fantastic place to work. But there are individuals. And so I would say do your best to get into, look at the surveys, talk to people, get into those specific teams you'll be interested in working on to find the team culture. I think the other thing that really helped me is on Twitter and LinkedIn is like literally like on LinkedIn, find people who work in those companies and just reach out to them. And a lot of them won't respond, but some of them do. Just keep trying. Just keep trying and ask very honest questions. Because you're going to spend a lot of your waking hours and working life there. They should be like a second family, whether you like it or not. So I would say take the effort to get in and meet people and talk to them and ask very honest questions. And be honest with yourself. It can be an amazing job with the wrong culture. And how much does culture mean to you? To me, it's huge. I stay here because the culture is amazing. It's wonderful. And I would say, yeah, find the surveys, talk to individuals. Is that how you, that's the question, is that right? I haven't missed anything else?
I think you hit the nail on the head. And you're 100% right. I mean, it's a third of your life at your workplace, so you'd better enjoy it. I think that's a great answer. Thank you so much, Keiko. I think we're going to have to move on to our next question for the sake of time, but I want to remind everyone that we'll have an opportunity to answer more questions in the chat during the breakout sessions. But let's move on. Emily, bring us home with our last question about international jobs. What advice do you have for those seeking international job opportunities? What jobs, maybe in industry or government, are open to international applicants?
Yeah, this is a really great question to ask any of the panelists here, because it seems we've all worked in countries where we're not citizens of. So I can give my perspective as a citizen of the United Kingdom applying and working for a industry position in the United States. And the rumors are true. It is very hard to get a job in industry in the United States. So I'll speak from my experience, but I would encourage anyone who is looking specifically to emigrate to a country and work there, that really you need to find information about the specifics behind that country, because every country is different. So I can give my perspective if anyone is interested in working for the States. So the short answer is it's pretty tough. It's not easy. Academia is definitely an easier route to go if you would like to work in the United States. And yes, government usually specifies non-citizens. I had that struggle myself. If you have your heart set on an industry position, it's easier to do it like I did, which is to be a student in the United States, extend your student visa and get a job during the extension, at which point hopefully they will offer you a visa. Now, I'm not a lawyer. All of this information is available online, or if you want to speak to someone, I'm sure there are other resources available. There is a process called the H-1B application, which is a lottery-based system which your company applies to for you. And if you are lucky enough to get it, then you are pretty sorted. The restrictions just keep getting harder and harder, fewer and fewer people allowed. If you have a master's or a PhD that you got in the US, then you are part of an even more specialized pocket of the H-1B. If you are abroad and you want to apply, look for positions that have H-1B or green card sponsoring available. Companies know that the more diverse their workforce is, the better the results are. So there are a lot of opportunities for people who would like to apply from abroad and in the US. It can be a little bit tricky. It's also possible to start in a company in your home country that has ties to positions in other countries. I had friends that got transferred across to the US from the UK, same company, different sort of branch, and they managed to get a visa through that. But I will warn, for the United States in particular, it can be a very stressful and expensive process. I did not win the H-1B lottery. I have spent thousands of lawyers' fees to work through the process to remain in this country with my job. So it's an incredibly rewarding experience being abroad, but it has some caveats to be aware of. I would say that it's probably easier, maybe if you are European, to stick to a European country. But I would encourage, folks to go for it and apply for jobs and see what the opportunities are available out there, because it has been very rewarding being in the United States. If there are any more questions about that, then again, not a lawyer, but I can definitely give you, anecdotes from my situations and support folks if they're going through that process and need some advice.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much, Emily.